Welcome to a PubSheds review of the RoboBrew BrewZilla 65L all-in-one brewery. Now this has been kindly provided for review by kegland.com.au, and you may remember that we've previously reviewed the Generation 2 and Generation 3 RoboBrews, so we're really excited to bring you a full brew day using the BrewZilla. So first of all, what do you get with the kit? So obviously the main RoboBrew unit with integrated pump, glass lid, immersion chiller, rotating recirculation arm with male and female cam locks and cam lock washer, RoboBrew boiler perforated false bottom and hoop ring thread nut and washer. And then for the malt pipe assembly, you get the malt pipe body, malt pipe handle, malt pipe lower tube, upper tube, false bottom, secondary mesh screen, cover screen to sit on the grain, upper tube with overflow funnel and a black silicone plug to reduce the risk of any grain going down the overflow. One of the questions we're often asked is why should I upgrade to the BrewZilla and what kind of key features or improvements does it offer over the previous models? Well, Kegland have listened to your feedback and now they can offer you a larger batch size with the 65L. That equates to roughly 50 litres at the end. They've given you an extra handle on the side for lifting. Now that may sound quite trivial, but actually when it comes to cleaning out the unit, that is really quite handy. Thicker mesh screens as well. We're now looking at 1mm, so that really does make a difference, feels more sturdy. Also notice that the edges are a lot smoother. There's hopefully no more catching your finger on those sharp edges, so that's a real improvement. 30 litre malt pipe, that equates to roughly 16 kilograms of grain. We have a click mechanism on the overflow pipe here so that you can feel when it's at the right level it will click into place. That's really quite nice. The switches themselves are really overrated in terms of current, and we've got 3 of them now, independently switchable, giving you a total power of 3,500 watts. There are larger vents at the sides and at the bottom, and rubber feet which now elevate it very slightly, which facilitates with the ventilation and also makes it a little bit more sturdy. There's also the larger immersion chiller coil supplied. Now the controller is very similar to the previous incarnations, if you remember those. Very simple to navigate. Obviously you've got your on-off switch here, temperature switch for setting your target temperatures, time for inputting the time that you wish for it to be at that temperature for, auto or manual mode, that's great if you want to set yourself up to 6 different steps there. You can program those in. At the moment we've got it set to manual as that suits our purposes for doing this review. And then obviously you've got the plus or minus increment buttons, and S1 to S6, that's for you to navigate between the different steps. And then you've got a play or pause button there if you wish to briefly stop any of the mashing. So today we're going to be brewing a clone of the Red Chimay, which should come out at around about 7.1%. So we'll rejoin you at the point where we're going to add the grains to the malt pipe. So included with the false bottom is this series of nuts and bolts and a ring there as well. That should ease with pulling it out at the end, and they simply attach to the hole in the centre of the false bottom. The false bottom itself has 5 legs and it sits at the very bottom to just elevate it above the actual heating part of it itself. Now that should hopefully reduce the risk of scorching, and also it's going to add that extra filtering as we go through the mash. So now that we've got the grain nicely stirred up there, we're ready to install the rotating recirculation arm extension, which is this part here, with the silicone hose as well to recirculate the wort over our grain bed. So to do that, just make sure that the valve is off first, and then locate it in the position you want, and you clamp down the 2 arms there to keep it nicely secure in place. You can put the lid on at this point should you wish, as there is a hole in the middle where you can push the silicone hose through as well. Okay, so now we're ready to turn the pump on. So to turn the pump on, firstly make sure that the valve is now into the open position and press the pump on switch, which is down at the bottom there. If I just show you that, pan down. There we are, it's this illuminated rocker switch, and like all of the switches there with this nice rubber sealing around it, that really is quite nice, helps reduce any possibility of moisture getting in there as well. So push the on button, you can hear the pump has kicked in, and now if we pan back up again, you should find that the recirculation of the wort has begun. So the good thing about this valve is that because it's such a powerful pump, you can adjust that flow rate with the valve actually, and you just want to make sure there's enough going over your grain bed there obviously to filter through, but also that you don't want to leave too little at the bottom or there's a risk of scorching on the elements as well. Okay, so we just adjust that down to a reasonable level and we'll just check that's flowing nicely, which it is. Okay, so we've reached the end of the mash phase here, and now we're going to do sparging next. To do that then we need to make sure that the pump is switched off, and then we can isolate the valve there as well, and then simply unclip as before. Now you might notice that at the top we've got this rubber handle, so it is a little bit warm, so very handy to be able to hold it by that and to remove it from the vessel itself. Okay, so as we are coming off with sparging, we also want to make sure our temperature is around about 77 degrees C. So to do that, we're currently in manual mode as we mentioned earlier, but you can set this as one of the automatic steps. But in manual mode, to do that you simply press the temperature button and it starts flashing. You can then press the plus button or minus button to increment or decrease the temperature until you get to the desired amount, and then hit play again. One more thing about the temperature, you can switch between degrees C and Fahrenheit. If you hold down the temperature button for a little period of time, then as you can see it then displays degrees Fahrenheit as a temperature. Okay, so we're currently sparging at the moment, and this was very straightforward to lift up. A little bit on the heavier side, obviously being that extra amount of grain in there, but with the handle it's very sturdy, and you've got the 4 feet there located around the outside welded on to the malt pipe there, so that is sat securely on top of the vessel and has been sparging very nicely. So the next stage is we're going to back the temperature up to around about 105, just overshoot that and get a nice rolling boil going, and we'll join you at the stage when we're ready to add our first hop addition. Okay, so we're now at the point where we're ready to add our first hop addition. That's Bittering Hops Tetnanger, and we've also got some light rock candy to add as well. And we're very impressed at how fast it reached the boiling point there. So we set it at 105 just to overshoot slightly, and with those high wattage elements there, it really did kick in very well and very fast. So we're at a point now where we can add those in. Let's go ahead and do that. That's great. And we're going to put the hops inside this sack as well, hopefully to reduce the amount of trub at the end. In they go. Right, so we're going to boil those for an hour, at which point we're going to add the second hop addition. Right, so with about 15 minutes to go now of the boil stage, we're ready to add our immersion chiller to get it sterilising in the boiling warts there. And we've also going to add our last hop addition as well, which is a combination of Styrian, Golding, and Hersbrucker, and also, there's also a clearing agent included as well, so you know, it helps as well. Those are our flavouring hops. Now the wort chiller itself, we've attached up to a hose which is going to drain into the sink there with a Jubilee clip on this end, and we'll do the same with the actual hose attached to the outside tap. We have to bring it all the way in from the outside unfortunately, but that should work quite well. And I think the wort chiller itself is slightly wider to fit the 65 litre vessel there as well, so hopefully the cooling should be quite rapid. We'll join you again when we're ready to start. So, as the immersion chiller is now inside the wort sterilising, it is worth mentioning something we've just found out, and that is that if you're doing a slightly smaller batch than the 65 litres, which we're doing today, then the immersion chiller does not go down far enough to be fully immersed, and therefore A, sterilised properly, and B, probably not going to chill the wort as rapidly as if it were fully immersed. So perhaps in future maybe a design adaptation could be just to have longer vertical arms coming off the chiller to attach onto the hoses on either side. And that would enable the immersion chiller to be fully immersed for both smaller and larger batches. So you now join us at the stage where we're ready to pitch our yeast. The temperature has been chilled down to 19 degrees C. We're all set to pitch that yeast. So the first thing we need to do is to open up the ball valve tap into the fermentation bucket. And a nice smooth flow there. That's really impressive actually. Let's hope that continues, because that will really show just how effective those 3 mesh screen filters are in terms of reducing the amount of trub at the bottom there. Right, so we're going to let that fill up and then we'll add the yeast, and at that point we'll then do a full summary of the pros and cons of the BrewZilla 65 litre homebrew machine from kegland.com. So now a summary of our findings of using the RoboBrew 65 litre for a full brew day. Well, one of the questions we get asked the most is, why should I upgrade? What are the advantages to me for investing a lot more money in the latest model compared to the previous versions? Well, for the RoboBrew 65 litre machine, it's really actually a combination of many little improvements which add up, I think. And I think that's really reassuring, actually, because it demonstrates that Kegland have really paid attention to their customer feedback and they've tried to incorporate those improvements into their latest model. Now, clearly the biggest feature is the extra capacity of the RoboBrew version 3. 65 litres, that's to the brim, which of course you wouldn't really want to go to, so 50 litres of wort is what that roughly equates to. And in terms of the malt pipe, 30 litre malt pipe there, that's going to hold roughly 16 kilograms of grain. Some people can go a bit further with that, but tends to be roughly 15 or 16 kilograms that it will hold. So that's of course the biggest upgrade for the Generation 3. With the larger size, we then of course need a larger diameter lid, which is also provided. And the wort chiller is also, I believe, more than double the length of the earlier models there, so that is going to allow the chilling to hopefully happen at the same rate, if not even faster. One of the biggest little improvements, if you like, for us was the extra thickness of the false bottom and the screens. Now previously, in very early models of the RoboBrew, I think we were looking at something like 0.6mm for the thicknesses there. Now that's been increased to 1mm. And that really does make a difference when you've got the extra grain there to hold in that 30 litre malt pipe. The edges of the screens have also been finished a lot more sufficiently, I think, so hopefully a lot less cut fingers as you place those inside the malt pipe. Another major improvement was the 3 individually switched low watt density elements. We've got 2000 watts, 1000 watt and 500 watt switches there. The idea is that the low watt density reduces scorching, and we certainly found there was absolutely no evidence of scorching on the bottom of the RoboBrew machine. We also like the idea that the switches have been thought of a lot more carefully in terms of design to reduce moisture getting in. Previously there were some issues of that happening, but they're now much more better at stopping that from happening. So we also have the switches themselves are overrated in terms of the ampage now. 30 amp rated switches there. And finally, having those larger vents on the side and more vents underneath as well, which have been, also the whole machine's been raised up with those rubber feet. Hopefully that's going to really improve air circulation for cooling. I know some people have in the past had issues with overheating. For us that's never been a problem, but certainly having those extra vents is very reassuring. Would I recommend upgrading to the RoboBrew 65 litre? In summary, yes, I would. I think the fact it's over-engineered has really stood out for us, and that's going to be a big advantage when you do those larger batch brews. But it's also flexible enough to have capacity for the smaller batches as well. Our only improvement would be that slightly adjusted cooling coil there for the smaller brews. But overall, we highly recommend this. It's the RoboBrew 65 litre homebrew machine from kegland.com.au.